on the day Francis's depressed stepsister attempted suicide for the 99th time. He abandoned me at our wedding venue for the 99th time as well. He said, as a psychologist, I must be responsible for my patient. And so, the system ruled that my conquest had failed. My punishment was to be plunged into severe depression, stripped of all will to live. From that day on, I only wanted to kill myself as soon as possible and return to my original world. When Francis finally realized that all I wanted was to die, he fell into despair and used everything he had learned in his lifetime, trying to cure me, trying to awaken even a shred of love I once had for him, trying to forcibly keep me in this world. But I had already stopped wanting him. Chapter 01. Just as Francis was about to exchange wedding rings with me, his stepsister, who suffered from depression, called again. Brother, Karen's wrists are bleeding so badly because the prince who was supposed to protect Karen is gone. Karen is going to turn into a mermaid and sleep forever at the bottom of the sea. When you look at the ocean in the future, will you think of Karen? Francis, who had been tightly holding my hand, suddenly let go. His voice trembled slightly. Karen, tell brother where you are. Brother will go watch the sea with you, all right? Don't do anything impulsive. Brother is coming right now. After hanging up, he looked at me with a hint of apology. Karen's emotions are unstable again. I have to go find her immediately. How about we hold the wedding another time? No. I clenched the sleeve of Francis's suit, ignoring the strange looks from the guests below the stage. I questioned him almost hysterically. Are you the only psychologist in the entire world? Why is it that every single time we get married, she attempts suicide? This is the 99th time she's done this. Francis, have you ever thought that maybe changing to a different psychologist would help Karen's treatment more? The depth in Francis's eyes instantly turned sharp. His handsome thin lips pressed into an unhappy straight line. His expression was so cold, as if I were the one being unreasonable. Karen was his reverse scale, untouchable, unspeakable, forbidden to offend. Chapter 02. I couldn't help but recall the first day I met Karen. She stole the handmade necklace Francis had made for me. Before I even had time to get angry, Francis stepped in front of her like a knight protecting a damsel and explained on her behalf. Karen developed kleptomania because of her depression. Don't blame her. I'll make you another one exactly the same. Since Karen likes this necklace, just give it to her. I opened my mouth, wanting to say that there were no two identical handmade necklaces in the world. I also wanted to say, then what if Karen likes you? Should I give you to her too? But in the end, I couldn't say anything at all. How could a normal person argue with someone who had depression? While Francis went upstairs to get antidepressants, Karen, whose brows and eyes resembled mine slightly, looked at me smugly and mocked me. You're just a low-quality substitute. Brother only found you because he couldn't cross that psychological barrier and couldn't bear to touch me. Brother studied psychology for me. In his heart, I will always come first. You'll never be able to compete with me. He. Her eyes curved as she smiled sweetly. Nothing like a person suffering from severe depression. Looking at Karen, I vaguely understood why Francis had fallen in love with me at first sight and pursued me relentlessly. I smiled politely and gently reminded her about boundaries. Of course, after all, you and Francis are siblings on the same household registration. As long as they were on the same household registration, as long as Francis's rigid, old-fashioned father was still alive, he would never allow them to develop a relationship beyond that of siblings. Back then, when Francis's father discovered the love letter Karen had secretly written to Francis, the first thing he did was force Karen Ning to change her surname to Karen Koo. Karen protested by refusing to eat, taking sleeping pills, and jumping into the sea. She would rather die than agree. Francis's father was uncompromising and refused to back down. It wasn't until Francis introduced me to his father that he finally stopped forcing Karen to change her surname. What families like the Koo family cared about most had always been their reputation. Karen's expression suddenly changed. She abruptly lost control, grabbed the glass in front of her, and smashed it hard onto the coffee table. With a loud bang, glass shards scattered everywhere, carving several long, bloody cuts into her palm. I was startled and instinctively stepped back several steps. Karen, however, seemed unable to feel any pain at all. She laughed wildly and arrogantly. Guess what? She said. Will brother blame you for not taking good care of me? Chapter 03. The very next second, Frantic footsteps rang out. Francis rushed down from upstairs and slammed into me, knocking me hard to the ground. Why didn't you keep an eye on Karen? He quickly scooped Karen into his arms, carried her to the sofa with extreme care, tended to her wound, and, brows cold, eyes sharp, questioned me. Do you even know she has severe depression and could attempt suicide at any moment? Her palm was painfully pierced by the shards of glass on the ground. Yet she didn't dare say another word. Afraid of provoking Karen again, Karen took the chance to hook her arms around Francis's neck, nestling against his chest. She sobbed in a babyish, coquettish way, her tone unable to hide her smug satisfaction. Brother. Karen really hurts. Francis sighed. When he looked down at her, his eyes were full of distress. After gently wiping the tears from her face, he turned his hand over to hold her injured one, and softly blew on the wound. Brother will blow on it and it won't hurt anymore. Karen is the best behaved. At that moment, Francis didn't even notice that I, on the floor, was bleeding heavily too. I kept comforting myself. Karen was sick, so it was only right that Francis paid more attention to her than to me. But later on, Karen was always Francis's first choice. Karen made a scene about suicide 99 times, and he abandoned me 99 times. In the freezing, silent deep mountains, in blizzards where the wind howled, on highways where traffic never stopped, outside lonely wastelands at midnight, at countless wedding venues. Because of Karen's depression, every time Francis left me to go to her, I never had the right to say no. This time, I truly didn't want to compromise anymore. No matter what Francis said, I clung to his sleeve and refused to let go. Because the system had repeatedly warned me last night, if Francis abandoned me for Karen one more time, it would count as a failed conquest. And then, I would be erased. To take the pressure off me and make me fight with everything I had to compete with Karen for Francis. The system even secretly told me that Karen's depression was an act. She would absolutely never kill herself. Francis looked anxious. Karen is my sister. I can't just ignore her. Besides, I'm a psychologist. I have to be responsible for my patient. We can hold the wedding any day. But if something happens to Karen today, I'll feel guilty for the rest of my life. I promise you, next time, I'll give you a perfect wedding. I shook my head, my voice rough and strained. Francis, if you leave this time, there won't be a next wedding for us. At last, Francis's patience ran out. He forcibly pried my fingers away, his handsome brows knitting slightly, his tone turning even colder. I will marry you, and I will save Karen. Those two things don't conflict. Why do you have to get stuck in your own head? This is a matter of life and death. Are you really going to keep being unreasonable? The atmosphere instantly froze. The guests below shot mocking looks at me from every direction. I opened my mouth, wanting to tell him Karen's depression was fake, that she wouldn't die. But I realized I couldn't say it. No matter what, the system said, anything it told me, I wasn't allowed to tell Francis. That would count as cheating in the conquest. I opened my mouth again, wanting to tell Francis directly, if you leave, I'm going to die. But before I could speak, Francis's phone rang again. He answered, gently soothing Karen on the other end of the line. Then, without the slightest hesitation, he abandoned me, turning his back and leaving without looking back. The next second, the system's icy mechanical voice sounded. Host, you have failed the conquest. You may freely choose your method of death. After you die, you will be sent back to your original world. Back to my original world? I suddenly felt that didn't sound bad at all. In my original world, I was sickly and plagued by illness, but at least I had a mother who loved me. In this world, aside from a body that was still fairly healthy, I actually had nothing. I thought for a moment and said to the system, then let me truly fall into severe depression and die at Francis's hands. Either way, I was going to die. I wanted Francis, this professional psychologist, to take a good look at what real severe depression actually looked like. Because it definitely wasn't what Karen looked like. Chapter 04. After Francis left, the wedding venue fell into complete chaos. For once, I didn't force a smile to greet and see off the guests who wore mocking expressions on their faces. Instead, I watched coldly as Francis's mother burst into tears and accused Francis's father. Do you really have to drive Karen to her death? You know perfectly well how much Karen loves Francis. If something truly happens to Karen, then I won't go on living either. When that time comes, we'll see what matters more to you, your family's reputation, or me and Karen." After saying that, she shot me a vicious glare and cursed harshly. "You shameless bitch." Then she turned away in anger and stormed off, as if I were the third party who had intruded into the relationship between Francis and Karen. But in reality, she was the mistress who clawed her way to the top, using every possible means to force Francis's mother to her death. Unfortunately, this was something the system secretly told me, and I still couldn't tell Francis. Otherwise, I truly want to see the look on his face if he ever finds out that the stepsister he had doted on since childhood is actually the daughter of the woman who killed his mother. Francis's father sighed and stepped forward, gently holding my hand. "You've been wronged. Karen's illness will get better one day. Endure it a little longer." I numbly pulled my hand back, nodded, and showed no emotion at all. The same words, Francis had said them to me countless times. Every time we argued because of Karen, he would always tell me to endure it a little longer and not argue with a patient. In the past, I would get angry, heartbroken, and desperate. But today, it seemed like I didn't care about any of it anymore. The system said that this was what severe depression was like. It strips away most normal human emotions, robs a person of all will to live, leaving only endless pain and a firm resolve toward death. I asked the system in confusion, but Karen's depression is so different from mine. Why can't Francis, as a professional psychologist, tell that she's pretending? The system was silent for a long time before replying. "How do you know Francis can't tell?" My breathing stalled. If Francis had already seen through the fact that Karen's depression was an act, then he was simply using depression as an excuse to indulge Karen without limits, to force me to make concession after concession, so that Karen could cross boundaries again and again without any restraint. Lies don't hurt, truth is the sharp blade. A dense, needle-like pain spread through my chest, pushing through the noisy, crowded throng. I stumbled home in a daze, after signing the body donation agreement and swallowing an entire bottle of sleeping pills. I numbly curled up under the covers and waited for death. Once I died, I could return to my original world and see my mother again. In fact, people who truly want to die always face death quietly, alone. How could they possibly make a spectacle of it everywhere, loudly announcing their wish to die, like Karen did? Chapter 05. In a hazy daze, the phone rang. I answered it. On the other end was Karen's sweet, coquettish voice. "Brother, what brand is your mattress? It's so comfortable." Heh. So Karen was in the bridal suite that belonged to Francis and me, sleeping on the wedding bed I hadn't even slept on yet. My stomach churned violently. "The mattress was bought by your sister-in-law." "I don't know the brand either." "Don't lie on it. Your sister-in-law hasn't slept on this bed yet. She'll be angry if she finds out." "Brother, then, have you slept with her?" Francis was silent for a long time before answering honestly. "No." Karen knew it. "Brother doesn't love that cheap woman who clings to you and won't let go at all. If brother really loved her, how could you possibly hold back for so long without touching her?" In a daze, I recalled how Francis and I had shared many moments of passion, yet every time we were about to cross the final line, Francis would always gasp, push me away, stroke my hair, and say he wanted to save the most precious memory for our wedding night. I once thought that was his way of cherishing me. I never imagined that he was keeping himself pure for Karen. Disgust rose in my throat as I was about to hang up. The next second, the sounds of kissing and soft panting came through the phone. Karen's voice, thick with desire, became broken and unsteady. "Brother, please don't push Karen away again. If you do, Karen will really be so sad that my depression will flare up and I'll want to jump off a building." Francis's originally cool voice turned hoarse. "Karen, I'm getting married. I can only be your brother. Do you understand? Brother, stop lying to yourself. Your bridal suite is clearly decorated entirely according to Karen's preferences." Because of the decoration of the bridal suite, Francis and I had fought countless times. Our aesthetics were worlds apart, and every argument nearly ended in a breakup. In the end, exhausted from fighting, I compromised and let Francis decorate it according to his preferences. Only now did I realize he had decorated it according to Karen's preferences. "Brother, Do you dare put your hand on Karen's chest and swear that you've never had improper thoughts about Karen? As long as you dare to swear, Karen promises she'll never cling to you again from now on. After saying that, Karen took a deep breath, waiting with absolute confidence for Frances's answer. And on this end of the line, I was waiting quietly as well. I wanted to know, after 5 years together, had Frances always been treating me as Karen's substitute? What I got was a long, drawn-out silence, the last shred of hope in my heart quietly shattered. So it turned out that all those moments I once thought were beautiful really had just been my own wishful thinking. In the end, Karen's blatant seduction broke the silence again. Let Karen be brother's first woman, okay? Karen really wants to see what brother looks like when he's truly moved. Frances resisted weakly. Don't mess around. This is my wedding room. Karen pouted sweetly. Isn't that even more exciting? Listening to their extremely intimate sounds, my mind became a tangled mess. I couldn't help but imagine, on all those nights when Frances abandoned me, what exactly had he and Karen been doing? Unable to control myself, I retched. I didn't know if it was just my imagination, but I heard Karen let out an extremely smug little laugh. As if she were showing off, she had beaten me once again. The next moment, Frances's panicked voice came through. Rowena, listen to me. Things aren't what you think. I let out a desperate, cold laugh. Then what are they? It's a long story. Wait for me. I'll come find you right now and explain. Get lost. Don't disgust me. Before he could say anything else, I used the last of my strength to hang up, then blocked him. My limbs gradually grew cold. My eyelids became heavy. I sank into a vast, chaotic darkness. I seemed to see my mother, just like when I was little, wearing a slightly yellowed apron, speaking in a soft, gentle Wu dialect, standing at the entrance of an alley with white walls and black tiles, waving to me as I played with mud. Good girl, come home now, wash your hands and get ready to eat. At the very last moment before I completely lost consciousness, I heard a series of urgent knocks on the door. Rowena, open the door. I really can give you a reasonable explanation. It was Frances's voice. What a pity. It was already too late. I was going to die, driven into severe depression by him and Karen, committing suicide right in front of him, a professional psychologist. When he thinks of me in the future, will he regret it? Will he feel guilty? Chapter 06. The smell of disinfectant lingered around my nose. Warmth spread across my palm, my hand seemed to be tightly wrapped in my mother's warm grasp. I struggled to open my eyes. If I opened my eyes, I would be able to see Mom. But the next second, what I saw was Frances, sitting by my hospital bed, tightly holding my hand, asleep with his arm propped up. He had grown much thinner. His jawline looked sharper than before, yet that only made him appear even more handsome. A simple, well-fitted white shirt clung lightly to him, accentuating his broad shoulders, narrow waist, and tall frame. At the slightly open collar, his collarbones stood out clearly. I had fallen for that handsome face of his countless times before, but now, all I felt was overwhelming disgust. I irritably pulled my hand back. Frances jolted awake. The next moment, my vision darkened as he tightly pulled me into his arms. Rowena, you're finally awake. His disordered breathing brushed against my neck, his voice trembling and hoarse. Why were you so foolish? Why wouldn't you listen to my explanation? He was too close. The cold pine scent unique to his body overwhelmed my senses. Mixed within that cold pine was a faint, lingering fragrance of gardenia. It was Karen's scent. Nausea surged through me. I pressed both hands against his chest and shoved him away with force. Get lost. Perhaps because I had slept for too long, my voice came out extremely hoarse and unpleasant. Frances's breathing hitched. For a long moment, he didn't come any closer. He looked at me with guilt. What I feel for Karen is only a sense of responsibility, a brother to his sister, a doctor to his patient. I only lied because I had no choice, just to stabilize her emotions. Karen didn't mean to provoke you either. Patients with depression often can't control their emotions or behavior. If you're angry, be angry at me. Don't blame Karen, all right? After Karen found out about your suicide attempt, her condition worsened again. When you're discharged, could you go comfort Karen a little? Before he could finish, I grabbed the pillow behind me and hurled it at him viciously. Screaming hysterically, You and Karen. You two lunatics. Can do whatever the hell you want. What does that have to do with me? But who do you think you are to stop me from dying? Who do you think you are to stop me from going home to see my mom? Then my emotions completely collapsed. I clutched my head with both hands, grabbing at my hair in a frenzy like a madwoman, my body shaking uncontrollably as I broke down into sobs. Do you even know? Just a little more, and I could have held my mom's hand and gone home. Francis froze. As an experienced psychologist, he almost instantly sensed the severity of my emotional state. He stepped forward, tightly gripping my wrist, his eyes red as he stared at me. Without giving me a chance to resist, he pulled me up from the hospital bed. Rowena, let's go to the psychiatry department, all right? Francis's voice sounded calm, but the hand gripping mine was trembling nonstop. Chapter 07. In the past. Francis often told me that whether someone has depression or not, at the moment they push open the door to his consultation room, the instant he sees their eyes, he can basically make a judgment. I guessed that he had already secretly given me a diagnosis in his heart. He just wasn't willing to believe that diagnosis. I struggled desperately, but Francis still took me to the psychiatry department without giving me any choice. He forced me to undergo a series of detailed psychological tests and physical examinations. The results showed that I was completely normal, with no depressive tendencies at all. The system said that in order to prevent Francis from developing sympathy for me because of my illness, which would count as cheating in the conquest, it had temporarily erased my psychological abnormalities. The moment Francis received the report, he let out a heavy sigh of relief. His face darkened with an expression that said he had seen through my little trick. Rowena, it is indeed my fault that I always leave you because of Karen. But you really didn't have to use such despicable means as pretending to have depression and attempting suicide just to compete with Karen for my sympathy and attention. Francis was clearly extremely familiar with patients suffering from severe depression, so familiar that it was impossible for a real severe depression patient to escape his eyes, and equally impossible for a normal person to pretend to have severe depression and fool him. Oh, except for Karen and me. I clearly had depression, yet Francis didn't believe it. Karen was clearly normal and pretending to be depressed, yet Francis believed her without question. Thinking of this, I couldn't help but let out a mocking smile. That's right. I was pretending to be depressed. So tell me, was my depression a little more convincing than Karen's? After all, I almost succeeded in killing myself. Karen attempted suicide 99 times, but not once was she as successful as I was, right? Perhaps sensing the sarcasm I directed at Karen, Francis frowned. Karen is my sister. There's no need for you to be jealous and compete with her. I don't know how things are where you city people come from, but I've never seen siblings who kiss. How can your thoughts be so filthy? I simply never. Francis spoke with displeasure and was about to argue with me, but before he could finish, his phone rang. I saw the caller ID, it was Karen, but the voice on the other end wasn't Karen's. It was a vicious, menacing male voice. Francis, your sister is in our hands. If you don't get here within 10 minutes, we'll kill her. Then came Karen's soft, trembling sobs. Brother, Karen is so scared. Karen's prince will definitely come save Karen, right? Before she could finish speaking, the call was abruptly cut off. A trace of hesitation flashed through Francis's eyes, but it was quickly overwhelmed by worry. Rowena, I have to go save Karen. This is something I owe her. I'll come see you tomorrow. The system told me that this kidnapping had been planned by Karen. If this time I could persuade Francis to stay, it would allow me to continue living in this world. But I had no desire at all to keep Francis. I only replied coldly, "Oh, I didn't believe that such a clumsy kidnapping act could possibly fool Francis. He simply had a habit of indulging Karen without any bottom line." Yet after hearing my response, Francis's footsteps stopped, his handsome brows furrowed slightly, a hint of displeasure flashing across his face. You're still angry, aren't you? Karen's been kidnapped. Why are you still competing with her? Afraid he might stay and continue arguing with me, delaying my suicide. I hurriedly assured him, I won't compete anymore. I won't ever compete again. Francis froze for a moment, then grew even more irritated. You should know, playing hard to get doesn't work on me. With that, he slammed the door shut heavily, his footsteps fading away. What a strange man. Before, When I didn't let him go to Karen, he got angry. Now that I was urging him to hurry and go to Karen, he was still angry. But I didn't have time to care about him anymore. I needed to hurry home. After scanning the empty hospital room, I stood up and walked toward the only window in the room. Outside the window stood a large tree, all its leaves fallen, leaving only bare, naked branches, gray and lifeless, just like my life, about to wither away. I watched as Francis's black Bentley drove out through the hospital gates. Taking a deep breath, I closed my eyes, climbed over the window, and leapt down, unwilling to stay in this world for even one more minute. Suddenly, the sensation of falling came to an abrupt halt. A powerful arm yanked me back. A white cloth was pressed over my mouth and nose. My vision went black. I lost consciousness. Chapter 08. When I opened my eyes again, Karen and I were tied up inside an abandoned factory. 2 kidnappers each held a knife to our necks. Karen still wasn't satisfied with playing her kidnapping drama with Francis. She even had to drag me in as a witness to their so-called love. She was seriously sick in the head. Francis stood opposite us, looking somewhat exhausted. You can name any price you want. Let Karen and Rowena go. It seemed he had already sensed something was off about this kidnapping. One of the kidnappers let out a cold snort. You can only choose one. We'll keep the other as a hostage. Once 50 million is transferred, we'll release the second one. Karen cried weakly, her voice shattered and pitiful. Brother, save Karen. Francis's hesitant gaze shifted back and forth between Karen and me. I didn't know what there was for him to hesitate over. He was obviously going to choose Karen in the end, perhaps feeling that Francis had hesitated for too long. Karen coughed lightly twice while crying. As if receiving a signal, the kidnapper suddenly applied more force. A sharp pain shot through me as the blade sliced a thin line across my neck. I turned to look at Karen. The knife at her throat barely left a red mark. Yet Karen immediately began trembling violently. Brother, Karen is so scared. Karen doesn't want to be kidnapped by bad people again like when I was 7. The look in Francis's eyes softened with obvious pain. Even though he knew this kidnapping was fake, he still couldn't bear for Karen to suffer even the slightest harm. Once again, he looked at me with guilt. Rowena, Karen is physically weak and has depression. She really isn't suitable to be left behind as a hostage. I know you've always been strong. Before he could finish speaking, the kidnappers impatiently untied Karen. As she passed by me, she let out an extremely smug, quiet laugh. It's such a pity you swallowed so many sleeping pills and still didn't die. But even if you copy Karen and try to commit suicide, it's useless. Didn't Karen tell you already? In Brother's heart, the number one will always be Karen. Her voice was light, but the malice in it was heavy. It was as if she couldn't wait for me to die right in front of her. Then, like an injured little rabbit, she darted straight into Francis's arms. Her trembling, delicate appearance was irresistibly pitiful. Francis held her with heartache, then tried to comfort me. Rowena, wait for me. I'll definitely save you. I looked at him calmly. No need. I struggled with all my strength. Perhaps because the kidnapping drama was already over, and the kidnappers Karen had hired didn't know what I was trying to pull, and didn't dare be too rough with me, I managed to snatch the knife from their hands. Karen turned pale with fright and shrank deeper into Francis's arms. Francis's expression changed. Instinctively, he turned sideways to shield her. Karen was just being playful. There's no need for you to hurt her. So he really did know this kidnapping was fake. I laughed and laughed, until tears streamed down my face. Then, under his guarded gaze, I resolutely raised the knife and slashed it across my own neck. Once I died, I could go home and see Mom. I wondered how Mom had been doing during the 5 years I'd been in a coma. Had she been running herself ragged day and night for my severe illness, growing much older because of it? The system said that because Mom had never signed the papers to give up on saving me, I was able to return to my original world after failing the conquest. ICU treatment was so expensive, how many buns would Mom have to sell? Waking up before dawn and working until late at night, just to keep my treatment going? The moment blood splattered onto Francis's face, his breath caught. He shoved Karen away and stumbled toward me, reaching out desperately to stop me, but it was already too late. With red eyes, he desperately pressed his hands against my neck as blood kept pouring out. Terror made his voice tremble uncontrollably. Rowena, you really wanted to die? You don't want me anymore? Could it be that all those psychological diagnoses were actually wrong? All of them? Heh, so Francis was finally willing to admit that Karen's depression had been an act? My vision went black. I completely lost consciousness. Chapter 09. When I woke up again. Francis had imprisoned me in his villa. Multiple suicide attempts in a short period of time. Extreme emotional agitation. Grief and indignation. Pessimistic, world-weary speech. Even though every examination showed that my psychological state was completely normal, Francis chose to believe his own professional judgment that I had truly fallen into severe depression. He held me tightly in his arms, his voice trembling. I can save you. I definitely can save you. I've studied psychology for so many years. I've saved so many patients, I can't possibly fail to save you. But in truth, he knew better than anyone. According to medical statistics, for patients with severe depression like me who attempt suicide repeatedly, the mortality rate within 1 year is extremely high. All it would take was one moment of negligence, one moment where he couldn't keep an eye on me, and I would choose to kill myself again without hesitation. Francis was trying to deny everything he had learned in his lifetime, trying to save me, afraid I might find another chance to commit suicide. He wouldn't let me do anything, and wouldn't allow me to touch anything. He fed me, brushed my teeth for me, washed my face for me. Even when I showered or went to the bathroom, he would stand guard at the door, staring at me without blinking. At night, when we slept, I wouldn't allow him on the bed, so he slept crouched beside it. At 1 meter 88 tall, with long arms and long legs, he curled himself into a tight ball, clinging to the edge of the bed like a dog. As long as I moved even slightly, he would spring up from the bedside, instantly alert. During the day, Francis's favorite thing to do was to silently hold me while listening to me hysterically curse him to die a horrible death. When I was finally too exhausted to keep yelling, he would rest his sharply defined jaw against the top of my head. Rowena, as long as you promise me you'll live properly, you can curse me however you want. The fact that you're still willing to curse me means you still care about me and about this world. I sneered and deliberately provoked him. Francis, you should know that if a patient with severe depression doesn't take antidepressants, barely staying alive just means suffering so much it's worse than death, right? Instead of selfishly forcing me to stay alive out of guilt, you might as well let me die cleanly. Ever since Francis brought me back to the villa, no matter what methods he used, I hadn't taken a single antidepressant pill. Without medication, my depression gradually worsened, and somatic symptoms began to appear. Whenever my emotions became intense, my limbs would go numb. When sitting still, a sudden buzzing roar would erupt in my ears, followed by brief deafness. It felt as if my heart were constantly being clenched by an invisible hand. The pain so intense I could barely breathe. I also developed extremely severe anorexia and sleep disorders, often going an entire day without eating a single grain of food, or staring blankly at the ceiling all night, unable to fall asleep. My suffering was vividly laid bare right in front of Francis. These were all textbook symptoms of depressive episodes, symptoms he was all too familiar with. I was gambling that Francis would soften, that he would give me a way out, let me return to my original world, back to my mother's side. But I never expected Francis to go insane. When I said my limbs were numb, he took out an electric baton and shocked himself without hesitation. His handsome face turned pale and twisted, carrying a kind of pathological obsession. Rowena, don't be afraid. I'm with you. Seeing Francis fall into madness, I was terrified. A sharp pain suddenly stabbed through my chest. The invisible hand clenched my heart again. I clutched my chest in agony, bent over, gasping for air. The next second, Francis took out a knife and pressed the tip against his solid chest without hesitation. The cold blade sliced through his white shirt, dark red blood soaking through the fabric over his chest. The corners of his reddened eyes lifted slightly, and those usually indifferent peach blossom eyes carried a trace of relieved madness. Rowena, now I can truly share your pain again. The blood continuously pouring from his chest stained my hands red. That warm, slick sensation sent chills through me. As the blade sank deeper and deeper, he trembled uncontrollably in pain, his body convulsing. Francis, you're insane. Francis stared at me with reddened eyes, his thin lips curling into a sinister smile. Rowena, from now on, Whenever you're in pain, I have to hurt even more than you, only then can I atone. Only then can you forgive me. I immediately realized what he was doing. He was using self-harm as a form of moral coercion, forcing me to forgive him, just like before, when he used depression as moral blackmail to force me to give way to Karen. As a psychologist, he knew far too well how to manipulate people's hearts. I pulled my hand back and looked at him coldly. Francis, don't delude yourself into thinking a self-inflicted injury will make me forgive you. You're not worthy. If you want to die, then hurry up and die. Stop playing the victim and disgusting me. If he died, no one would be watching me. I could quickly kill myself and go home. I'd be more than happy about that. Chapter 10. Perhaps my indifference cut deeper than he expected. Francis froze for a moment, then forcefully pulled the knife out of his chest and flung it aside. The blade hit the floor with a crisp clang. Then, suddenly, he grabbed the back of my head and bit down hard on my lips. Rowena, how can you be so unmoved when I'm hurt like this? How can you just stop loving me? What right do you have? He flipped over and pinned me beneath him, completely losing control as he began tearing at my clothes. His palm slid slowly upward from my waist, his normally cool peach blossom eyes stained with thick desire. His voice low and coaxing. Do you know how antidepressants work? They make your body produce dopamine, suppressing your pain. But antidepressants aren't the only thing that can make your body produce dopamine. Intimate contact can too. It can flood you with dopamine and make you forget the pain, at least for a while. Trust me, I can take you from hell to heaven in an instant. As long as you try it once, you'll fall in love with me all over again. You're just sick. It's not that you don't love me anymore. In the dead silence, only his disordered breathing brushing against my neck grew clearer and clearer. His sharply defined handsome face loomed infinitely close before my eyes. My fists rained down on Francis like a storm. He didn't react at all. The more I struggled, the harsher his kisses became. The force was brutal, as if he wanted to tear me apart and swallow me whole. The pale dress was shredded in his hands. A wave of humiliation crashed over me, and I couldn't stop the tears. Large drops fell onto the back of Francis's hand. His entire body stiffened. He released me, grabbed the blanket and wrapped it tightly around me, then slapped himself hard across the face. I'm sorry. Then he used his fingertips to wipe away the tears at the corners of my eyes, begging in a low, broken voice, what do I have to do for you to forgive me? Curled up inside the blanket, I let out a numb, hollow laugh. Let me die, and I'll forgive you. Francis's expression froze. His pale lips pressed into a straight line, his voice hoarse with despair. Rowena, as long as you promise me you'll live properly, I'm willing to do anything for you, but I will never stand by and watch you die. Chapter 11. Because there was no medication to intervene, my depression grew more and more severe, and I gradually began to lose parts of my memory. Even my hatred for Francis faded along with those memories, so I cursed him less and less. Yet instead of feeling relieved, Francis became increasingly panicked. Rowena, even if you scold me every day, that's fine. Just don't be this calm. You're like this. I'm really scared. I looked at him in confusion. I wanted to curse him, but I didn't know where to start, because I couldn't clearly remember what had happened between us. I only remembered that he had made me live in unbearable pain, a life worse than death. Francis began digging out videos he had recorded when we were together, trying to lead me back into remembering the beautiful past we once shared. We went hiking together, bungee jumping together, watched the sea together, lay on vast grasslands together waiting for sunrise. These videos were all different, yet they shared one thing in common. At the end of many of them, only I remained, talking to the camera in a low, lonely voice. Francis left me again to go find Karen. When will Francis finally turn back and see that I need him too? I'm also very scared, walking alone from the deep mountains back to the city in the middle of the night. So it turned out, my depression had never come out of nowhere. Francis fumbled and hurriedly turned off the television. I looked at him calmly, grabbed the remote, and played the next video. It was footage from his home's security cameras. Francis visibly relaxed and didn't stop me. Perhaps he thought that inside his own home, he would never abandon me. In the surveillance footage, Karen's smug smile lifted. You're just my low-quality substitute. Brother only found you because he couldn't cross that psychological barrier and couldn't bear to touch me. Brother studied psychology for me. In his heart, I will always come first. You'll never beat me. He. At the end of the footage, Francis was holding Karen, gently comforting her, and I had been knocked to the ground by him. Glass shards scattered everywhere, slicing into my palms until blood flowed freely. No one cared. A tidal wave of memories crashed into me. My hands and feet went cold, sweat breaking out as I vomited uncontrollably, purely from a physical reaction. These videos didn't bring back any beautiful memories. They only dragged me into even deeper pain. I turned off the television myself. The room fell into a deathly silence. Francis brushed his fingers over the scars on my palm and asked in a trembling voice. His head lowered. Rowena, that day, did it hurt? It was the cruelest kind of concern I had ever heard. Because it had come far too late. I pulled my hand back and nodded numbly. The moment he looked up at me, his eyes reddened, flustered and powerless. He tried to explain. I didn't mean to ignore you. I just had no way to not care about Karen. Rowena, I always thought you were strong. I really never imagined you would become depressed. He repeated these lines over and over again. It sounded less like he was speaking to me, and more like he was trying to deceive himself. I stared at him steadily and finally asked the question I had wanted to ask for a long time. Do you think my depression is the same as Karen's? If only one of us actually has depression, who do you think it is? Francis slowly closed his eyes. After a long while, he opened them again. When he looked at me, his eyes were filled with sorrow. But I can't take that risk. Karen is my only sister. I owe her so much that I must repay. But I can promise you this, I truly have not the slightest romantic feelings toward her. Heh. So it turned out he knew all along that Karen's depression was very likely an act. But he didn't dare take the risk. So he could only keep betraying me, again and again. As I recalled those countless moments of being abandoned, a bone-deep chill suddenly swept through me. I crouched down, unable to stop myself from trembling. Francis reached out, wanting to touch my head, but his hands stopped in midair. His voice shook. Because of Karen's illness. Between you and Karen, I always chose to favor her in the past. But I didn't know my favoritism would hurt you this deeply. Would indulge Karen to the point of... He paused for a long time before forcing the words out with extreme difficulty. Malice. Then Francis took a deep breath and made what he seemed to think was a major decision. Rowena, you were subjected to too much stimulation, so you developed a self-protection mechanism, trying to escape everything through forgetting and death. And the source of that stimulation is Karen. I'll make Karen come apologize to you. I'll also personally choose a political marriage partner for her. I promise you, she will never interfere in our lives again. I had longed for this promise from Francis countless times. Now that I finally had it, I didn't want it at all. All I wanted was for him to let me go. Let me die. Let me return to my original world. Francis, I don't care about Karen's apology at all. And I don't care whether she gets married or not. The most important thing is, there is no possible future for you and me. Francis, however, stubbornly called Karen over. He pressed her down and forced her to apologize to me. Naturally, Karen refused. She cried and played the victim, looking at me with venomous hatred. Brother, when you were 9 years old, if it weren't for me being kidnapped by human traffickers while trying to save you, the one with depression should have been you. Do you know how much I suffered in that mountain village? If I hadn't risked my life to escape, that's what you owe me. I've been repaying it all this time. What else do you want me to do before my debt is cleared? I'd rather it had been me who was taken back then. Francis clutched his head with both hands, staring at her in collapse. But Rowena doesn't owe you anything, he said hoarsely. It was my repeated indulgence without limits, and your repeated provocations, that pushed Rowena into severe depression. Just apologize to Rowena, just apologize. I won't hold it against you. We'll still be family afterward, all right? Apologize? Karen let out a cold laugh. Why should I apologize? Depression? I think it's all fake. Isn't she just deliberately seducing you through suicide? I can commit suicide too. Who can't? Francis rubbed his brow impatiently, his eyes turning cold as he looked at her. You've attempted suicide 99 times already. Haven't you made enough trouble? Karen wiped away her tears, shoved Francis aside, and ran up to the top floor of the villa. Francis instinctively took a step after her, then stopped. He bent down, took my hand, and murmured, "Let her think things through properly. Rowena, I will never abandon you for Karen again." I pulled my hand back and turned my head away, not wanting to look at him. The next second, a figure fell past the massive floor-to-ceiling window in front of me. Karen really committed suicide. With a dull thud, she fell from the rooftop on the 5th floor onto the ground below the villa. When Francis rushed out and gathered Karen into his arms, she laughed wildly, her eyes crazed. "Brother, I want you to owe me for the rest of your life an unpayable debt. I will never marry anyone else." Chapter 12. Before Francis sent Karen to the hospital, he gathered up everything in the villa that could be used to end my life, and sealed all the doors and windows shut. But what he never could have imagined was that even though I couldn't get out from the inside, Karen's mother would come in from the outside to find me. She brought 4 or 5 bodyguards with her. The way she looked at me was filled with vicious hatred. "It was you. You're the one who almost got Karen killed. You shameless homewrecker." Francis and Karen grew up together as childhood sweethearts. How could you have the heart to destroy them? As she spoke, she raised her hand to slap me. I reacted quickly, dodging to the side and swinging backhandedly, slapping her across the face. Smack! A clear handprint instantly appeared on Karen's mother's cheek. I sneered and cursed coldly. Only a mistress would raise a daughter as shameless as Karen. Only a mistress sees everyone else as a mistress. She covered her face, then turned toward the bodyguards behind her, grinding her teeth. "Hold her down." The bodyguards rushed forward and pinned me into a corner against the wall. Karen's mother reached into her Hermes bag and pulled out a syringe, stabbing it straight into my neck. She laughed wantonly. "Mistress?" Many years ago, Francis's mother said the same thing, called me a shameless mistress. Guess how that ended for her? Once this injection goes in, you'll suffer intensely and die within 1 minute. Even if a forensic autopsy is done, nothing abnormal will be found. You'll end up just like Francis's mother, ruled as a sudden cardiac death. The dead aren't qualified to compete with the living. I collapsed to the ground in agony, as my breathing gradually faded. Karen's mother left in satisfaction, taking the bodyguards with her. But what she didn't know was, in order to monitor me, Francis had installed countless hidden surveillance cameras throughout the villa. Chapter 13. After Karen was sent into the operating room, Francis saw that scene on the surveillance footage. He rushed home like a madman, but it was already too late. What awaited him was only Rowena's cold, lifeless body. He knelt in front of her corpse, slapping himself over and over again. In his muddled mind, only one thought remained: revenge. He staggered back to the hospital. He was going to make Karen suffer a fate worse than death. Karen had just woken up from anesthesia after surgery. As usual, she clung to Francis's arm and coquettishly acted cute. "Brother." Karen's legs hurt so much. "Brother, blow on them for me." Francis stared at her with a dark, heavy gaze. But Karen still hadn't realized the gravity of the situation. "Brother, Karen broke both her legs for you. If you don't marry Karen, no one else will want Karen." Before she could finish speaking, Francis's furious voice rang through the ward. Each word enunciated clearly. "Karen, you and your mother are shameless bitches." Karen's eyes widened in disbelief. Francis had never spoken to her in such a harsh tone, and he had always liked her mother. Shock, rage, and guilt twisted across Francis's face. He yanked Karen down onto the floor and clamped his hands around her throat. Karen struggled desperately, but Francis was like a beast that had lost all reason. If the doctor on rounds hadn't arrived in time, Karen would have been strangled to death on the spot. Francis had used too much force. Karen's freshly operated legs touched the filthy hospital floor, causing severe infection and festering. In the end, both legs had to be amputated. Knowing she was in the wrong, Karen's mother didn't dare call the police. She could only slink away and take Karen home in disgrace. Francis drove the mother and daughter out of the house. He didn't want them to die immediately. He wanted them to fall from the clouds into the mud, to suffer endlessly before dying. The ragged mother and daughter endured countless hardships on the streets. Every day, Karen's mother pushed the disabled Karen from door to door, begging for money, Karen couldn't believe Frances could be so ruthless. Lost in delusion, she truly fell into severe depression. In the end, over a rotten steamed bun fought over with beggars, they were beaten to death during a brutally cold winter snowstorm. After they died, Francis set his house on fire. He said his father had failed his mother, and he had failed Rowena before he died. The system asked Francis whether he wanted to leave all of his family's inheritance to Rowena. Hearing Rowena's name again, Francis could barely breathe. In the scorching flames, he told the system, word by word, to pass on a message to his Rowena. If there were another chance to meet again, he would never fail her. By then, I had already been home for a long time. As compensation, the system erased the illness from my body. I recovered completely from my severe illness and was at home with my mother, watching TV and eating a steaming hot meal, when my bank card suddenly received a massive transfer of $1 billion. The system told me that it was the inheritance Francis had left for me. I asked the system in confusion, weren't the currencies of that world and this world incompatible? The system replied apologetically, back then, I only chose Francis as your target because he treated his sister so well. I never expected this. I converted the money from that world into this one. I caused you to suffer so much. From now on, take this money and live freely. I accepted the money without hesitation. After enduring so much suffering, that $1 billion, I deserved it.